Ladies and gentlemen, most people wake up every day and ask, what do I need to do? Some ask, how do I get through today? But very few stop to ask the most important question of alog, why am I walking this path and with whom? You see, we live in a world that praises independence and self-made success. But the truth is, walking alone doesn't mean walking empty. There is a difference between alonic and being led. And when you walk with God every day, truly intentionally, you discover a kind of strength, clarity, and peace the world can't give you and it can't take away. Today, I want to invite you into a new mindset, not a list of rules or religious rituals, but a relationship, a journey, a why so deep that it anchors your steps, even when no one else sees the path you're on. In today's world, the moment we open our eyes, we're hit with noise. Alarms, notifications, emails, headlines, before our feet even touch the floor, the world is already making demands on our attention. But here's the truth. How you start your day sets the tone for how you live your life. And when we begin in chaos, we carry that chaos with us. That's why if you want to walk alone with God every day, you must begin not with interruption, but with intention. Intention is about choosing to be proactive rather than reactive. It means taking back ownership of your first moments and offering them, before anything else, to the one who gives you breath in the first place. Starting your day with God isn't about being religious. It's about realignment. It's about saying, before I do anything today, I want to make sure I know who I am, whose I am, and why I'm here. When you wake up and reach for your phone, you're giving someone else a message, a headline, a social feed, permission to define your mood and direction. But when you wake up and reach inward or upward, you begin to take control of the story. You begin the day not with fear, comparison, or anxiety, but with purpose, identity, and peace. That is powerful. Walking alone with God every day isn't about walking away from the world. It's about walking into the world anchored in something deeper. And that starts the moment you open your eyes. Ask yourself, what would change in my life if the first voice I heard each day was God's, not the world's? Intention doesn't require hours of your time. It doesn't mean you need to chant or memorize entire scriptures before breakfast. It's about presence. It could be 5 minutes of stillness before you rise, simply whispering, God, today I want to walk with you. Guide me. Speak to me. Let me see the world through your eyes. That kind of posture changes everything. Your reactions, your choices, your relationships, your peace. Starting your day with intention creates a ripple effect. You begin to respond instead of react. You start looking for meaning instead of mindlessly going through the motions. You carry a sense of groundedness, even when the day gets messy, because you know you didn't start the day alone. You started it with alignment. And here's something to consider. When you give God your first, you tend to trust Him with the rest. There's something deeply transformational about putting first things first. That small daily decision becomes a statement of trust. You're saying, God, I believe you are with me, that you care about my day, and that your presence is not reserved for churches or crises. It's available to me right here, right now, in the ordinary moments. We often think we need more time, more motivation, more clarity to feel connected. But maybe what we need is to just begin differently. Start small, start quiet, start deliberately. You don't need to change everything. Just change how you start, because how you start your day is how you live your life. And when you start with God, you start with direction, not distraction, with peace, not pressure, with purpose, not panic. So tomorrow morning, before the world gets a piece of you, give the first moment to the one who holds all your moments. Let your day begin not with interruption, but with deep soul-rooted intention. That is how you walk with God. Not someday, but today. In a world that constantly demands your attention, creating space for God isn't just helpful. It's essential. We carve out time for what we value: meetings, workouts, meals, entertainment. But when it comes to God, we often give Him the leftovers. If we give Him anything at all, the truth is, a deep and personal walk with God doesn't happen by accident. It requires intentional space, not just physical space, but mental, emotional, and spiritual space where connection can actually happen. Sacred space doesn't have to mean a candlelit room or a quiet retreat in the mountains. It simply means a space that is set apart, a place and time where your soul knows it is safe, where God is welcomed, and where you can be fully honest and fully present. It could be a corner of your room, a bench in park, a few moments at your desk before the day begins. What matters is not the size or look of the space, but the reverence in your heart when you enter it. Creating sacred space is about making room for relationship. It's recognizing that you weren't created to power through life alone. You were made for intimacy with the God who designed you. And intimacy doesn't grow in the rush. It grows in stillness, in quiet moments, in unhurried conversations. Think about your closest human relationships. They didn't become deep through business or multitasking. They became strong through time, attention, and space. The same is true with God. When you consistently make room to meet with Him, something begins to shift in your spirit. You start to hear His voice more clearly. You begin to recognize His guidance throughout your day. Your heart softens. Your trust deepens. And you start to realize that space you created isn't just for Him. It's also for you. It becomes a place of renewal, grounding, and strength. A place where masks can fall and where peace replaces pressure. Too often people approach time with God like a checklist. Read a verse, say a prayer, move on. But sacred space invites more than routine. It invites presence. It says, "Ooh, God, I'm not here to perform. I'm here to be with you." Whether you speak out loud, journal your thoughts, reflect on scripture, or simply sit in silence, the key is connection, not perfection. The moment becomes holy because He is in it, and because you are in it fully. If you want to walk with God every day, you must first learn to meet Him every day, not just when you feel like it, not just when life is hard, but consistently, faithfully, expectantly. Because just like in any relationship, consistency builds trust and trust builds depth. And here's something beautiful: the more often you create sacred space, the more your life itself begins to feel sacred. You start seeing the divine in the ordinary. You recognize moments throughout the day, in conversations, in decisions, even the quiet, as opportunities for connection. You begin to walk through life not just aware of God's presence in the morning, but attuned to it all day long. So ask yourself, where can I make space for God? Or can I meet with Him not out of guilt, but out of desire? And what would happen if that space became the most protected, most valuable part of your daily routine? When you prioritize sacred space, you're not just giving God a place in your schedule. You're inviting Him to take His rightful place in your heart. And from that space, everything else flows. We live in a noisy world. Our lives are filled with voices, opinions, alerts, tasks, entertainment, expectations. Even in our moments of supposed silence, our minds often remain cluttered, running through to-do lists or reliving yesterday's conversations. So when it comes to walking with God daily, many people struggle not because God isn't speaking, but because they haven't slowed down enough to listen. Listening to God is not a mystical act reserved for the spiritually elite. It's an intentional practice, and it starts with stillness. Most of us are far more comfortable talking than we are listening. We bring God our prayers, our requests, our anxieties, and our agendas, but relationship isn't built on monologues. It's built on dialogue, and every meaningful dialogue includes silence, listening, and response. Stillness is where listening begins. And in stillness, God's presence becomes clear. When you quiet your surroundings, and more importantly, your soul, you begin to tune in to what's always been available. The whisper that's often drowned out by the noise of everyday life, it doesn't shut to compete with your distractions. He waits to be welcomed. Think about it. The most powerful voices in your life are rarely the loudest. A mentor, a friend, a parent. The people whose words stay with you are often those who spoke them with thoughtfulness, not volume. God is no different. His voice is often gentle, nudging, quiet, not because He's distant, but because He's close. And when you slow down enough to listen, you begin to recognize that voice more and more. Stillness isn't the absence of activity, it's the presence of focus. You can be still in your car, in a waiting room, even during a walk. What matters is not your location, but your attention. Are you present? Are you open? Are you willing to stop speaking long enough to hear something deeper than your own thoughts? When we listen more than we speak, we begin to notice God in ways we never have before. In the way a verse speaks directly to your situation, in the way a thought brings unexpected clarity or peace, in the quiet conviction that nudges you in a new direction. This kind of listening isn't just about hearing words, it's about receiving wisdom. And that wisdom guides your steps, reshapes your reactions, and anchors your heart. But this kind of stillness requires trust. It takes faith to pause when everything in your life feels urgent. It takes courage to be silent when your instincts scream for answers. Yet ironically, it's in that very silence where God often reveals the most. In the Bible, when the prophet Elijah sought to hear from God, he expected a mighty wind or fire. But God wasn't in the chaos. He came in a still, small voice. That hasn't changed. To walk with God daily, you must make space not just to speak, but to listen. You must learn to sit in the quiet, even when it feels uncomfortable. Because stillness isn't empty. It's full of possibility. It's in those unhurried moments that God does His deepest work. He brings clarity where there was confusion, comfort where there was fear, and direction where there was doubt. So the next time you come to God, don't rush in with your list. Start with silence. Breathe. Be still. Invite His presence, then wait. Listen not with your ears, but with your heart. He speaks in peace. He speaks in truth. And he speaks to those who are willing to be quiet long enough to hear him. Because when you choose stillness, you don't just find silence. You find God. Every day we make decisions, big ones, small ones, and everything in between, from how we spend our time to how we respond to others, from what we commit to what we avoid. And whether we realize it or not, our choices are often influenced by two powerful forces, purpose and pressure. One is rooted in clarity and calling. The other in fear and expectation. One draws us closer to peace. The other leaves us drained and disconnected. When you walk with God, you begin to learn the difference. Pressure says, you have to do this or you'll fall behind. Purpose says, you were made for this. Move forward with peace. Pressure pushes you into frantic activity to prove your worth. Purpose calls you to act from a place of already being loved, already being chosen. It's not about striving. It's about aligning. Many people live their lives in response to pressure. The pressure to keep up, to be liked, to achieve more, to meet someone else's expectations. But pressure, when unchecked, becomes a kind of noise, a distortion of your true identity, and a distraction from your divine path. It leads to exhaustion, resentment, and regret. You start saying yes to things that look good, but aren't good for you. You start doing more, but becoming less. Purpose, on the other hand, brings focus. It doesn't always make the path easier, but it makes it clearer. When you know your purpose, when you are aligned with God's direction, you don't need to chase approval. You don't need to perform. You begin to choose what truly matters, even when it's not popular, even when it's not easy. You begin to live intentionally instead of reactively. And here's the truth: purpose doesn't shout. It often whispers, which means if you're only responding to the loudest voice in your life, the urgency, the anxiety, the external demand, you'll miss it. You have to get quiet, listen, and ask, is this decision aligned with who God is calling me to be? Not just, can I do it? Or will people like it? But is this rooted in purpose or driven by pressure? When you allow purpose to guide your decisions, your entire posture changes. You stop rushing. You stop trying to prove something. You begin to lead your life instead of being led by circumstances. You become more grounded, more joyful, and more courageous, because purpose gives you the courage to say no, not just to bad things, but to good things that aren't your things. Walking with God means inviting him into your decisions, not just the spiritual ones, but the everyday ones. It means asking not only, what do I want to do, but what was I created to do? What is the fruit of this path? Will this bring me closer to God or pull me away from him? Pressure is loud and urgent. Purpose is steady and sure. One wears you out, the other builds you up. And when you choose to let purpose lead, you become more than just productive. You become effective. Your energy has direction. Your yes has meaning. Your no has confidence. And your soul finds rest in knowing you're living from a place of divine alignment, not human demand. So today, take a breath. Step back. Don't rush into another decision just because you're afraid of what might happen if you don't. Ask yourself, what does purpose say here? What is God saying here? Because when you walk with God every day, your life is no longer shaped by pressure. It's shaped by purpose. And that's where true freedom begins. In life, we are taught to focus on results. From a young age, we're measured by grades, performance, productivity, and success. We begin to believe that the outcome is everything, that value lies in what we can produce, achieve, or control. But when you walk with God, the standard shifts. He doesn't measure your worth by your outcomes. He's looking at your obedience. Obedience is about trust. It's saying, God, I may not see the full picture, but I'll follow your lead anyway. It's choosing to take the next right step, even when the results aren't guaranteed or the path doesn't make perfect sense. That kind of obedience requires faith, not just in who God is, but in the belief that his way is better, even when it feels slow or harder or unseen. So often we get caught up in managing results. We say things like, what if it doesn't work out? What if I fail? What if people don't understand? But those questions are rooted in fear, not faith. They place more weight on the destination than on the journey, but God is not just interested in where you're going. He's deeply invested in how you get there. When we choose obedience over outcome, we're saying that following God is more important than impressing others. We're saying that his timing is better than our own. We're declaring that success isn't measured by applause or numbers. It's measured by faithfulness. Sometimes obedience looks like stepping out. Other times, it looks like staying put. Either way, it's not about what happens next. It's about who you're following now. Look through Scripture, and you'll see this pattern again and again. Noah built an ark before there was rain. Abraham left his home not knowing where he was going. Moses went back to Egypt to face a king with nothing but a staff and a promise. The common thread, obedience, not outcome. They didn't wait for proof before they acted. They moved in faith, trusting that God would take care of the rest. And he did. But obedience doesn't always lead to immediate breakthrough. Sometimes it leads to wilderness, to waiting, to quiet seasons where it feels like nothing is happening. But those are the times when God is often doing the deepest work, refining your character, building your trust, preparing you for more than you can currently see. If you only obey when the results are clear, that's not trust, that's transaction. And God is not looking for deals, He's looking for devotion. Walking with God daily means living with a surrendered heart. It means saying, God, I'm not here to get my way. I'm here to follow yours. It means being faithful with the small things, even when they seem insignificant. It means forgiving when it's hard, loving when it costs something, and doing the right thing even when no one is watching. That is obedience, and that is where the power lies. Because when you obey, you're not just honoring God, you're aligning your life with His favor, His wisdom, and His peace. The outcomes may not always look how you imagined, but the internal reward, the peace of walking in step with God, is something the world can match. So stop chasing outcomes. Let go of the need to control every result and start asking a different question: what is God asking of me right now? Then do that fully, faithfully, and without delay. Because in the end, God never said, well done, good and successful servant. He said, well done, good and faithful servant. That is what obedience looks like. That is what walking with God every day is all about. There will come a time in your walk with God, many times in fact, when the path He leads you on will not make sense to the world around you. It may not even make sense to you. It will be quieter, lonelier, and often less glamorous than the one others are walking. But that is the nature of faith, choosing the unseen path over the visible crowd, trusting the voice of God over the noise of people. The crowd represents comfort. It represents approval, popularity, and safety in numbers. There's a kind of security in doing what everyone else is doing, in following the trends, chasing the same goals, living according to the same timelines. But here's the problem. What's popular isn't always purposeful, and what's common isn't always called. You weren't created to blend in. You weren't created to be set apart. Walking with God daily means learning to trust His direction, even when it goes against conventional wisdom. It means saying yes to quiet faithfulness over loud performance. It means taking steps in obedience when the world says, that doesn't add up, or you could be doing more. It means walking away from things others are running toward, and walking toward things others can't yet see. The unseen path doesn't come with guarantees. It comes with a promise, I will be with you. And that is enough. When God leads you, He doesn't always give you the full map, but He gives you enough light for the next step. Your job isn't to see the entire road. Your job is to follow the one who does. Think of Abraham. He was told to leave everything familiar and go to the land I will show you. No directions, no detailed plan, just trust. That's the nature of the unseen path. It's not comfortable. It's not crowded, but it's covered by God's presence, provision, and purpose. Crowds offer you applause. God offers you assignment. The crowd says, fit in. God says, follow me. The crowd asks, what will people think? God asks, will you trust me? And trust is the key, because there will be days when you feel like the only one choosing integrity, the only one pursuing purpose over profit, the only one saying no to shortcuts and yes to the long, narrow road. But take heart. God never called you to follow the crowd. He called you to follow Christ. And He never walks you down a road He hasn't already walked Himself. As you walk with God each day, you'll find that the unseen path becomes more familiar, not because it becomes easier, but because His presence becomes enough. You'll start to value peace over popularity, calling over comparison, eternal fruit over temporary applause. You'll start to see that walking alone with God is never truly alone, because He is always with you. And here's the miracle: when you trust the unseen path, God uses your life to lead others. Your faith becomes a light, your courage becomes an invitation, and your quiet steps of obedience begin to speak louder than the crowd ever could. So don't be afraid to walk differently. Don't be afraid to stand alone. The path may not be visible to others, but it is valid. And in God's economy, it's the road less traveled that leads to the most worth living. Choose the unseen path. Walk with God, and let your life declare what your words could never fully say. I trust you more than I trust what I see.